Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 55 of the Bill Podcast, and in this episode we'll be exploring Ubuntu, especially how to execute some very common Linux commands in Ubuntu's terminal. Now before we proceed through the episode, let's go through some of the requisites, or rather prerequisites. The very first one is terminal. I've shown terminal in episode 2 because I already felt that using the terminal is so relevant to all our development work. So here I've gone through very basic commands here. Next is also the episode on bash. So here I have gone through some bash scripting as well, and how to set your bash prompt as well as your bash profile, as well as for some automation at an interval, some cron jobs. Lastly, I will be running Ubuntu, which is a Linux distribution, through something called the VirtualBox so that we can virtualize the operating system on our host operating system. So do watch this episode as well, as I will not go through the installation process of Ubuntu, but it should be really simple. All we will do is get Ubuntu, download the ISO file, and fire it up via the VirtualBox. Now, after the prerequisites, let me go through a little bit about Linux. So Linux is a kernel, and it is a Unix-like or POSIX-compliant computer operating system. So I definitely recommend going through the Wikipedia page as usual to get a brief overview on the history. Now, I should emphasize that Linux is a kernel. What is a kernel? In an operating system, if you see here, the kernel resides in the middle, and underneath you have all the hardware, and on top of it you have the application, so not to be confused. I also very much like to go through the Google search on kernel and operating system, and once we do that we will see a graphical view on the program, kernel, the hardware, and their relationship. So I felt looking at, for example, you can choose any of the pictures, but I chose this one. It kind of shows the relationship. So here you see the hardware is right at the bottom, and there you see the kernel. And the operating system basically consists of the shell, the device drivers, the kernel. And on top of it are the applications. It is also important to note that the graphical user interface, such as some examples include GNOME or KDE, or even such as Synarch, they all also reside on top of the operating system. So it is also definitely worth noting that there are literally thousands of Linux distribution. This Wikipedia page lists all of it with a beautiful graphical diagram about all their relationships. So here I am on the Ubuntu page, one of the very user-friendly Linux distributions, so that is why I'm going through Ubuntu. But to note that whatever commands that I will be going through in the course of this episode, it will be very similar across any Linux distribution. So I wanted to kind of get into this as an introduction to any Linux-based operating system. If you go to ubuntu.com and in the download page, what I will be downloading is the 32-bit of the latest operating system. The version that I will be using is 13.10, and once you download, you'll get a .iso file. Now I have already done so let me just fire up VirtualBox. And this is how our very familiar VirtualBox manager will look like. So as you have seen, I've already prepared Ubuntu Box. So let me just go ahead and start it. And it will straight away bring me to the desktop. Now do remember to install the guest editions in VirtualBox so that your screen resolution and mouse functions work properly. This is just for VirtualBox. Now I have not done anything to this Ubuntu desktop except that I have a file right here on the desktop, as you can see here, and I have cleaned up the launch bar a little bit. From now on, the only thing that we will be working on is the terminal so that we can get familiar with very common Linux commands. So not to worry. It might seem a little daunting, only command line, but I believe it will be helpful for many of us who intends to work with Linux boxes through the course of our development work. And let's get started with very common Linux commands. The very first one to note is definitely ls, which will list out all the directories and stuff. And if you do ls-l, notice what happens. It will give us the permission and a little bit more detail about who is the owner of these files. Now there are also many dot files within this folder, which is actually the home folder with a tilde, as you can see here. But if we want to display all of them, we need to do ls-al. And this will basically give us a list of the dot files as well. Let me clear up the screen. So a little bit of revision. When we do ls, or the very first word that we type, that is actually the program. And this can actually be queried with what is the version of the program. In our case is ls. But most importantly, if we want to know more about any command, the best way to do that is man and then the name of the program. In this case, man ls. And you will get lots of definition on this, especially on the various options that you see here, which is -a, which we just used right now. And to quit this manual, you simply press Q and you will come back to the terminal. Now the cool thing about Linux commands is that you can pass in options. You can pass in options one by one like we did before, or you can even combine them. Instead of -a and -l, you can combine them and say -al, which we did before. So if you do not want to execute the command, you can simply do Control C and it will not execute the command. The other cool way to know more about what type of command it is, you can simply do type and then ls. This time it is actually aliased to something. Alias means it will be a short form to something longer. In this case, it is alias --color auto, which means just now when we did ls and there were some color, for example, some blue in this case, it is giving some color. Let's try something else. How about type pwd? In this case, it will tell you that, hey, it is a shell built in. Let's try type cat. It is an executable rather from this file and path. So let me clear the screen once more. The other cool thing, another command is who am I? Simply, it is to basically know what is the current user's name. Now we are executing this as a user, or rather an ordinary user. If you want to execute this as a root, or rather the super user, you can simply do sudo and then su. Now notice the prompt in this case, it starts with a $sign. When you do sudo su, or rather super user, notice that it will ask you for the password, and the prompt will basically start with a hash sign or a pound sign. So in this case, you can execute many commands as you want as a root, and they will not ask you for a password. If you want to exit to being the ordinary user, you can just press exit and you will be back to here. So let me go on to sudo su once again. And now if you say who am I, you will notice that it will change to root instead of the usual username. So let me exit and go back. Now if you want to say execute only one command as a super user, you can simply do sudo and then ls. And this will be executed as root. The next couple of commands is to know a little bit more about this computer. The first one is called uname. So it will give us the information on the operating system. But the cool thing is that if you do uname-a, which is an option to say all information, notice that it will give us the kernel name, the kernel version. But of course, with man uname, you will know exactly what each of the options do. For example, -s will give you the kernel name, -n will give you the node name, -r will give you the kernel release, and so on and so forth. So Q to quit back. Another one is simply host name, and this will basically give you the host name, or rather the name of the computer. Let's explore something called echo here. So if you want to say echo, it is something like printf or putS in Ruby, Python, and all other programming language. So let's just do echo hello. So it will simply say hello. Or let's just try echo hi there, and it will say hi there. Now the cool thing is you can even pass in some variables. Now in our operating system, user, or rather $user, is a variable, and if you query that, well, it seems it can't find it. let me try echo hello and then $user. And it will simply say hello and then the username. Now, if you're wondering where am I getting this $user from, or rather where can I see all the list of these variables, they are known as environment variables. You can simply do print env, one word. And once you do that, it will give you a long list of all the variables that are related to this specific environment. So let me clear the screen one more time. Let me go to the desktop. So I will do change directory and then to desktop and tab, just so that it can autocomplete. And if I do an ls in the desktop, it is completely empty except for one text file, which is distro.txt. I basically copied from the Wikipedia page to list all the Linux distros. So in order to create a file inside a folder, you can simply do touch and then the file name. Let's just do hello. And now if you do ls, it will be distro.txt and hello. If you want to kind of see what is the content of this file, you can simply do cat and then hello. Obviously, it is empty. Why don't we do, say, ls, which will basically give us distro.txt and hello. But the cool thing about Linux command that you can actually pipe it to a file. So if you have this greater than sign and then hello, it will basically have whatever it was output to the terminal into this file. And now if you do cat hello, guess what? The contents of this file will be distro.txt and hello. Now, as you know, if we simply do date in our terminal, it will give us this date. So why don't we simply do date and then pipe it to hello? And now if we want to see hello, guess what? It is having just the date. But what if you want to append to the file instead of just overwriting everything? In this case, let's do ls, but we will do a double greater than sign and then hello. Notice how the ls information will be appended after the date. Obviously, nothing will come out here until we do a cat hello. And yep, you will see the date first and then all the ls information. Let's explore a little bit about the echo command that we did just now. If you do echo and with a single quote, if you say I am and then $user, notice what happens. So if you want the terminal to kind of evaluate it, you use double quotes. So notice what will happen now. This time it will evaluate to the username. Now, all this while we have been executing the command and it is coming up right in front of us in the terminal. What if we want to run some background jobs? So this is a little bit into multitasking. So in this case, you can run the command and then put an ampersand. Now let me run a different command this time. I will run a command called top, which will basically give us the top programs that are running right now according to percentage in CPU and other information. Let's run it by itself first. And this is how it will look like. So I'm just gonna Control C to exit it, and it's exiting. So let me clear the screen. This time I'll do top and then ampersand to make it run in the background. So after you execute a certain command with ampersand ending off, you will see that it will give you a job ID and the process ID. If you want to bring this from background to foreground, all you need to do is percentage and then the ID number. And there you go, the top is seen right here. So I'm just going to quit it and clear it. Next, let's get into some kind of file operations. So this is what happens when I list all the files and folders in desktop. So if you want to copy the file distro.txt from desktop to, say, the home directory, so let's first display the home directory with a tilde sign. You notice that there is no distro.txt. So if you want to copy and move it, all you need to do is cp and then path to the original file. For our case is /desktop/distro, and then simply path to the destination. And once you do that, if you query ls and the home directory once again, you will see that distro.txt is right there. Now in comparison, if you want to move a certain file, what we will do is we will use the command mv, and this time why don't we try to move the hello file from desktop to the home directory. And if we do list all the files and folders in the desktop, this time the hello file is not found there because we did not copy it. But if we do ls for the home directory, you will see a file called mv as well as distro.txt. Well, I should have named it as hello, but this definitely shows you that you can also move and rename a certain file. So there you go, you see mv and distro.txt. Of course, you can also go ahead and delete the file. In this case, you can simply do rm for remove, and you can query the home folder and then mv. And now if you list all the files and folders in home directory, there is no mv. So I will clear the screen, and this time why don't we make a new folder? So let's say we do mkdir to make a directory, and let's just say project. And if we list, there you go, you will see a new folder being created. Now if you want to create nested folders but you do not want to create them one by one, you can simply do mkdir-p, and let's just say project/assets/js. And when you do that, once you list, obviously you will still see only the project, but guess what, you can get inside the project file with cd project. You can get inside assets, and if you ls, you will see assets inside there. And of course you can get inside assets, and you can also list, and you will see JS right there. So let me get back to the desktop, but cd home/desktop. Let me clear all of them. Now let's try to remove the project folder. So to do that, if you try rm and then project, notice that it can't be removed because you have to remove all the nested items inside that as well. And to do that, we will do rm-r to say recursively remove them, and then you can do project. And yep, the project folder is removed now. This time let me create a new file and call it home, and I'll basically list out all the home files and folders. So like we did before, we will simply use the greater than sign and then home. And if you cat home, you should be able to see all the file contents, which are basically all the files and folders from the home directory. Why don't we try to cat distro.txt, because it is a very long file. And this time what we will do is just head and then distro. And there you go, you will see only a certain number of lines from the top. Similarly, you can also do tail and then distro, and this will give you the last few lines. Now you might be wondering, how is this helpful? You can use the tail command and then -f, and then if you kind of say the file name, it will continuously watch for the file, and if there are updates, it will output it right here. And this is especially useful for any type of log files. Lastly, you can also view a file with the line number, and in this case it is NL and then the file name. Notice here the left hand side will contain a column with the line number. So obviously I have 48 number of line in this file. Another cool thing is word count in a file. So let's just do the same thing in this file distro.txt. So the very first number is the number of lines. The next one is the number of words. And the final one is the number of kilobytes or the file size. So this is a little bit of statistics. And finally, if you want to edit this file, you can obviously use Vim, which is a very powerful text editor. If you do not know Vim, the other very simple one is Nano. And then let's press the file here. And it will give you a very simple interface to kind of write and edit this file. As stated right here, I will Control X to exit. Moving on, there is a command called du, which kind of tells us the disk space in this current directory, which is really tiny. Why don't we do du and then the home folder? So it obviously gave us a lot more information. This is the amount of size, and this is the exact folder of file name right here. Now, if you want to display this in bytes or kilobyte, you can pass in some options. Why don't we display it in megabyte, which is -m. Sorry, du and then the home directory. And notice that the numbers have decreased significantly because we are dividing it by the megabyte 1000. Let's also talk about a little bit about file ownership. So if you want to check out the ownership, it's good to do ls-al, which will list all the files and folders in the current directory. But you can also do a particular one followed by the file name, obviously. And this will only give you the file that you queried. So notice here it will be RW and then dash, which means you cannot execute this, and the first 3 words refer to the current user. So let's say you want to make this file an executable. You can use the command chmod for a modification, and then U for user plus X, and then of course the file name. Notice what happens to the permissions now. Notice here there is an X here. Now if you do not want to make it, say, readable, I'm gonna do chmod, but this time I'll do dash and R. So notice how the R right here will disappear. And if I query the permissions once again, yep, strangely you can't read the file anymore. You can also change these values, which is a binary, like 1, 0 if it is readable or not readable, 1, 0 if it is writable or not writable, X also if it is executable or not executable in terms of hex values. I'm referring to this cool online converter for chmod. So notice here we want to get back to the original permissions. For owner it was read write, for the group it was only read, and for others it was only read as well. So this is 644. So let me go back here and we will do chmod 644 and then the file name. And now when we query the permissions, it is back to the original, which is only read and write for the current user. A little bit of finding a certain file. So you can use the find command and then the path to the directory. So let's just say for our case it is desktop. And let's pass in the name as an option. So dash name. Why don't we pass in distro.txt? And when we query this, notice that it will come up with the list of paths where this certain file is found. So find command is very useful for this. Once again, do ensure to check out a man and then the command name. In this case, it is man find, to know the various other options and arguments that you can put in. Next command that we will explore is grep. This allows us to find a certain keyword within a bunch of text. So let's say grep, and let's just find for the word Linux in this file distro.txt. And it will basically output only the lines with the word Linux inside it. This is a very powerful command, and I'm definitely scratching only the surface. So do go ahead and Google in order to find out how you can use the grep command powerfully. The other word manipulation command is awk, and over here you can pass in certain commands to kind of only denote the first word or certain command or certain column. So for example, in this case I will only pass in the first word of each line. So I'll do print and then $1 and obviously the file name. And once you query that, notice it will only display the first word of the entire file. And there you go. Now I do want to point out that together with grep, awk and sed, it is very powerful for text manipulation, and there are tons of tutorials out there. I highly recommend this Stack Exchange URL to find out more how you can use these along with regular expressions to query files. Next, let's go through some file compression formats. So here in our desktop, we have 2 files. So why don't we try to compress distro.txt into a tape archive? So to do that, the command is tar, and then we will pass in 4 options, and that is -c, zvf, and the ultimate name of the compressed file. So in this case, I'll do distro. Archive files, it will be .tar.gz, and then the input file. Once you do that, when you do an ls, you will see that the newly created compressed file is right there. Now if you want to query what is inside a certain .tar.gz file, you can do tar, and then this time the options will be -t-zvf and then the compressed file name. And it will tell you right away, hey, this compressed file only has one file, which is distro.txt. And if you want to unzip it, let me first remove the original file, which is distro.txt, so that we are only left with the compressed file and another file. So to uncompress it, this time we will run -xzvf. And let's list all the files and folders. you'll see that along with the compressed file, there will be the uncompressed file as well. Let's clear this, and this time I will also remove the compressed file. Next, let's discover another file compression, which is the GNU zip format. So in order to gzip something, we'll simply do gzip and then the file name. And once we list all the files and folders, you'll see that this time it is .gz file extension for GNU zip format. And once again, if you want to unzip it, you can use this command called gunzip and then the compressed file name. So the cool thing about gunzip is it will be a two process. It will not only uncompress the file, it will also delete the compressed file. Let's go through some storage and processes commands. The very first one is ps, which will kind of list the running processes. And of course, we have very few of them right here, including the one that we use to run this command, which is ps. Now let me start Firefox right here, and then we will run ps once again. And Firefox is running, so let me get back to the terminal. This time I will run the command ps with certain options so that it will list out all of them. But what if there are thousands or hundreds of them? In this case, we can use the pipe command and also the very familiar grep command to only list the ones that we want. In this case, it is only Firefox. And notice here, it will list us two of them. One is obviously being used with the grep, and then the other one is the original Firefox program that is running, and it is even giving a process ID which is 2695. You can also run PID off and then the program name, which is Firefox. It will also give you 2695 in this case. If you want to quit Firefox from the command line, you can simply do kill and then the process ID name, which is 2695. Notice what happens to the Firefox right here with a hue of orange as the background. If I kill it, it will completely disappear as a closed item, something like this. Another cool command is to see uptime, which is kind of to see how long this machine has been running. So this machine has been running for 46 minutes from this time with a load average and so on and so forth. Another one to kind of see what is the information about storage, you can run free. It will tell you how much is used and how much is free. Another cool thing is this command called df, which will list all the disks available. Some more information about the system that we are running. Alright, great. So now that we have gone through a few of the commands, let's learn how to schedule them. The very first one is how to delay a certain command. So in order to delay a certain command, we can do sleep and then the number of seconds after this. I'll pass in ampersand so that I can say what is the next command. In this case, I'll simply pass in echo and then hello. Echo hello is something that we already learned before, but let me reduce from 10 to maybe just 3 seconds so that you don't have to wait for that long. And once I execute this, echo hello, or rather the word hello, will appear after 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, and then hello. Similarly, you can also execute a certain command at a certain interval. In this case, I will execute the date command, and that is the date. And when I do watch, which is to say execute at a certain interval, -n and then 2, and then the command name, which is date in this case, notice what happens. It will open up in a new UI. But notice every 2 seconds, this seconds will change. So 31, 33, 35. And of course, you can do command or rather control C to kind of exit and come back to the command line. So these are how to execute after a certain delay or after a certain interval. And of course, there's this thing called cron job as well, which I went through in previous episodes. Finally, let's go through some networking as well. If you do apt-get and then show, it will list all the networks that are connected to this computer. If you want the default network particularly, you can do apt-get show and then eth0, and this will kind of give you the default one. So let me clear the screen. Another very common one is to query a name server with the program called host. Why don't we query google.com, and it will give us a long list of the IP addresses and some domain names. If you want to query a certain name server, you can do host and then -t. Let's say only the A records. So we can simply do google.com once again. And this time it will only give you the A records. Let me clear the screen. And this time, instead of A records, let's say you want MX. And this is the information you will get. Finally, there is also ping to kind of check if a certain remote host is available. It is really useful to kind of check whether internet is available. I will simply do Control-C to kind of stop it. And finally, as part of a Linux command, it is very important to know the package manager, which will allow us to install various applications and programs. For Ubuntu, it is called apt-get. You might have heard about brew or Mac ports for macOS, or for Arch Linux, another type of distro, you might have heard about Pacman. There is also Yum for Fedora, I believe. So these are various names of package managers. You can do update to kind of update the entire software package, or you can also do upgrade. These are certain commands that you should be running probably every few weeks or so to kind of update and upgrade the entire package management system. But if you want to install some new packages, let's check out this program called Whois. If I query this right now, or rather Whois and then a certain host name, let's try google.com once again. So it will say Whois is not available, so we can actually install it with sudo apt-get install Whois. So why don't we do that? Since we said sudo, it will ask us for the root password and it will install the package Whois starting from 0%, 50%, 51, 56. And finally some dependencies, and it is installed. And after it is installed, you can actually query Whois and then version. And finally, you can actually go ahead and use it. So Whois google.com. And this time it should give you some information. Yep. It is a huge information that we can query and look at it. So let me clear the screen. And in order to remove it, we can similarly do sudo apt-get remove Whois. Yes, I do want to remove it. And after you remove the package, if you try to query the same command, obviously it will not be available. No such file or directory. So that was a brief overview about many common Linux commands. I have showed Ubuntu, but I believe you can run these same commands in an Arch box or in a Red Hat Linux, Fedora, Debian-based Linux distro. Some basic common Linux commands to start off. And if we ever come across a headless operating system which is Linux-based, it will basically boot up in a command line. We will not be afraid to explore and execute commands or do file manipulation in it. So let me exit the VirtualBox in a safe way and shut down. And it will bring us back to the VirtualBox manager. So I'm just going to quit VirtualBox. Now, before we end this episode, let me go through a few resources which I found very useful. One of them is Learn Linux the Hard Way by Zed Shaw. He has created amazing tutorials on Learn to Code the Hard Way for Python, Ruby, command line. Now, this one, I did not find it in the web, so I had to go through web.archive.org. So do check this out. The next one is a Linux Pocket Guide, which is basically listing very common Linux commands, as well as the options and some use cases. This is something that I used personally to learn about common Linux commands. And of course, there are tons of books if you just go ahead and Google in Amazon.com or many of the programming websites. I found many of them a little bit too advanced for me, so I wanted to learn about Linux by knowing the few commands first. Of course, when we are a little bit advanced, we can go into the system administration or even programming interface. And finally, for the build link of the episode, I'm going to give it to Security Now, which is a podcast hosted by Steve Gibson and Leo Laporte from twit.tv. It is called Security Now Illustrated. So this is actually an audio podcast, but people like me find it very hard to kind of visualize certain computing principles. For example, routers, Wi-Fi, VPN, how the internet works, Ethernet security, memory, And this person has very kindly went ahead and visualized the entire thing. As we are getting into the operating system and networking level of things, I find that I need a little bit of theory and information about all this. So I found this really helpful. So do go ahead and check out Security Now Illustrated. And that's it for this week's episode of Build Podcast. For rest of the episode, go to build-podcast.com and subscribe via one of the 6 channels: RSS, iTunes, Vimeo, YouTube, GitHub, or Twitter for your content. And I'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.